Today on the podcast, please subscribe and review said pod. Leave 30 reviews today. One guy right now, I want you to go, you know what? I'm going to do this. LeBron's power is unprecedented, and he may need it to try to get a team that's going to beat the Warriors. Jordan Spieth joined us after his walk-off chip-in, and Dakich crushes my guy Chris Paul, calls him a fraud.
The Ryen Russillo Show podcast.
I was driving in today, and I told Freeze Pops that I didn't tell him. I told myself I was going to tell Freeze Pops that I wanted the original Will Smith Summertime, but I want the Summertime sample because I heard DJ Wonder doing it this morning on my ride in, and it put me in a great mood. And it was so weird, and this is going to sound kind of jerky. Shocker, right? Russillo Show, ESPN Radio. But question to you, Will Cain co-hosting with me today. Is it wrong for me to wish the song Summertime wasn't Will Smith? Like, if somebody else did it, would it be better? Should it be remade? Do you care?
No, I care. I only care because I like to learn about you. It's insight into you. You're above Will Smith, but you're not above this song. And that's what you're trying to reconcile.
I don't want to be a hater, you know, like as I've said this a few times, I think in the last year. I'm just kind of tired of like all the consumption of this guy's the worst, this one's terrible, what are you doing? I don't want to be a hater with a lot of stuff, but like Will Smith isn't my favorite, but he's out there living his life. He's doing his thing. Yeah, his kids post every now and then can freak me out, but you know what? Maybe he's having fun with all of us too. So like I don't want to beat up on a young kid either, but I like that sample so much, and the original sample is so good that I kind of want it to be done by somebody I really, really like.
Here's what I think.
Okay.
I think you shouldn't worry about it. I think you should be a trendsetter. And I think if you, 42-year-old, 41?
41.
41.
A little time.
Year-old Ryen Russillo, roll around in your ride with the windows down, pumping. I'm not talking about listening to. I'm talking about pumping Will Smith Summertime. You are way cooler than if you were riding around playing Meek Mill or Migos or Future.
How dangerous. How nervous are you? You just said 3 rappers in a row, and you think you got it right, and you're kind of looking at me going, am I going to get one of these wrong? Hey, look, I was listening to Dom Kennedy last night. Went to get an ice cream cone. There's a place near my place. It's like open 11 o'clock at night. Walked in, a little rough, got cut by 7 people. I just kept it moving. Hat down, tank on, got back in. Dom Kennedy out of the parking lot. All right, the Russillo Show, presented by Progressive Insurance. It's time right now for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Again, Will Cain with us. Carrie Champion presented at the BET Awards last night. You may have seen a tweet or two on the BET Awards. I understood less than 5% of them. Carrie Champion's going to come on and talk to us about it. 2:45 Eastern. I can't wait. Really excited. I have a question for you, though.
Yes, sir.
So with all the NBA stuff that's happening, and it's going to keep happening because we're right in the middle of this awesome soap opera of the NBA offseason. Last night we had heard, and we told you on the show, the Cavs were looking for a third team, younger pieces to flip that to the Pacers so that they could get Paul George on Cleveland. And then Denver was the reported piece last night, Mark Stein, Chris Haynes. Okay, before we worry about any of that stuff, because I'm not sure that any of it's imminent, it's just that we know that you've even pointed this out, a lot of the offseason is about LeBron, and LeBron personally is trying to find a way to gear up as much as he possibly can.
Right.
I believe LeBron is the most powerful athlete in team sports I've ever seen and going right now. Is that something you would agree with?
Sold. Bought. I'm in. That's unassailably true.
So we're also looking at what can the Cavs do this offseason to prepare themselves for this upcoming year, because if it isn't good, if they don't get the pieces LeBron wants, and it's still very challenging to get these kind of players when you're kind of just moving contracts around, or Kevin Love, who I think is now becoming underrated. But if it's ugly in 2018, then LeBron opts out and he can move on. You think that would be as bad as him leaving 7 years ago for Miami?
Do I think if LeBron bails next year, it's as bad as 7 years ago?
Yes.
I do not.
You do not? Okay.
I do not.
I thought we talked about this, but you just...
No, really quickly, I'm not going to derail us here. I think you can only cheat on your spouse once. I mean, if they bring you...
shocked?
They bring you back, it's on them at that point. I mean, if LeBron leaves again, it's on Cleveland.
Okay. All right.
So he's done the damage.
So we're in agreement, most powerful. Then we do agree that if you've already had this happen to in your Cleveland, like you can still be upset if LeBron leaves in 2018, but it's already kind of happened. You've come back, you've won a ring. But I think we're collectively, even if people aren't going to like his next move, like there's not going to be a bunch of people going, yay, he went to the Lakers. I love this guy. He's awesome. It's just not the way we operate. But we're going to be a little more numb to it because we've already seen it happen not only with LeBron, but with Durant. What if I told you somebody in the NFL who is LeBron's contemporary? It's Tom Brady. Like, these guys are not just really good. We're talking about perhaps positioning themselves to be the best that have ever done it in their sport. Brady is going to be 40 in August. He'll have made about $200 million career earnings. He could leave after next year. What if Brady said, you know what I want to do? I want to choose my ending. I want to run this thing the way a LeBron runs it, because we don't have anyone in the NFL that even shows a glimpse of having that kind of individual power that LeBron has. What if Brady said, I want to play for the Niners, lifelong dream, childhood team. I want to resurrect him. I want that to be my final chapter. How would that be consumed? Would it be good for him? Would it be how dare you? Like, I think it's just really interesting to think in one sport we're becoming more accepting of it in the NBA, but we don't like it. Where in the NFL, we never even think of it as an option.
I think it'd go over like a lead balloon. I think it'd be a fart in church. It would not work whatsoever, even to the, well, I was going to say universally praised, but Tom Brady's very divisive, right? Very. Isn't that right?
I think the anti-Brady stuff at this point is just you're a Jets fan and you hate him and you're going Deflategate and Spygate and you just don't want to. You're trying to find ways to make yourself feel better about your team.
I'd like to see an approval poll on Tom Brady. I bet his negatives are pretty high. Not that they should be. I'm not arguing for should. I'm just saying is.
Okay, but it's not who he is as a player. If you're just going about it and saying, like, I just have a hard time believing that there's still a guy at Buffalo Wild Wings that's sitting there being like, I don't know, dude, system QB. Like, I know there's going to be somebody. I'm not saying there's zero people that say it, but I don't think it's a lot of people that have a ton of friends.
That's right. All that being said, I agree with you, Brady's position in football. I think Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time. I actually think Tom Brady's the greatest football player of all time. I think Tom Brady's respect ratio to hate ratio is heavy on the respect side. And if he tried to pull a LeBron James move and said, I want to play in San Francisco, boyhood team, 49ers, that's my dream, I think it would be crushed in the media. I think he would be seen as a prima donna. I think he would be seen as, who do you think you are? Trying to engineer the outcomes.
Football is about team.
Yeah. I think it would go over horribly. I think LeBron gets this path, not all paths, but this path, much more made available to him than Tom Brady ever would.
That's kind of interesting.
You don't think so? What do you think?
There's a million different ways I could look at this, where the first thing is if you're in the car, you're going, well, why would Brady ever want to leave? LeBron wanted to leave because he didn't believe in Cleveland, didn't believe in their management. And the sports are really different because you just have to link up with one of those other two, top 10 players, top 20 players.
But we're setting the why aside. So Brady wants to, period. So.
Yeah, just Brady. The counter to it would be Brady would never want to leave New England. New England's never been confused with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah.
So why would he want to leave? All right, so we're setting aside the why.
Yeah, that's not a counter. That's an excuse out of the debate.
I'm just trying to think of all of the things I need to deflect. Like, all right, go ahead and hit me with the 10 unnecessary things, and let's get down to the core of this. If Brady said, I'm out, would it be...
How would he be treated?
It couldn't be anything as bad as it was 7 years ago for LeBron, right? You're saying it would be bad, but just people were really upset. Like their world, like things that they believed. It's like finding out wrestling's fake. When LeBron left for Miami the first time, this isn't even real anymore.
Well, maybe I'm only analyzing this in a post-LeBron world, like the world that's existed for the past 7 years, where a player in the NBA can do that. I mean, Kevin Durant got a lot of heat, clearly. And LeBron, should he do it again, will get some heat. But I do think if Tom Brady tried to pull this off, even at the age of 39, it would not be received well at all. I think we allow individualism in basketball to such a greater extent than we do in football that it's almost beyond the realm of consideration.
I want to do a little bit more on this perhaps, but there's also something that you said today about what? A LeBron team of him, Paul George, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Paul?
No, Carmelo.
So Melo, Wade, George, LeBron, all team up.
Yes.
In the next few weeks.
Which I know it's video game. I know it's like fantasy draft. But Brian Windhorst reports that if Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade are bought out, there will be interest in Cleveland, mutual interest.
And your answer bummed everybody out. So we'll do your answer on what that team would be.
The Ryen Russillo Show. Russillo.
Brian Windhorst will try to help us sort out all the moving pieces in what could be the Cavs, trying to find a way to add Paul George. Will Cain all day today, and then we're going to do a BET wrap with Kerry Champion next hour. Are you ready for that?
I mean, 100% not. No.
Can we prep him? Let's prep him at the end of this hour. Prep Will Cain for a BET interview.
I missed it. I was prepping for First Take, watching Chapo on Netflix, doing both. New series on Netflix.
Oh, that's the new one, right? That's the guy. That's the. Is he a Mexican drug lord?
You don't know El Chapo?
Yeah, I do. But is it Mexican drug lord?
Yes.
Right. I want to double check. I don't want to offend anybody by not getting it right.
It's good.
Is it better than Narcos?
You have to quick review. It's produced by Univision and Netflix, so it's in Spanish. So you have to deal with the dubbing. It's got English language dubbing. And that's a little bit of a hurdle, right? But if you can get over that, I love Mexican drug cartel stuff. Love. I'm also an expert in that.
Wait a minute. I had this whole time I've been working with you, I had no idea that I was sitting next to a Mexican cartel expert.
Yeah. You want to talk about the Zetas, the Sinaloa cartel? We can talk about that.
You guys should have that in the post-show pod.
In other words, next.
So Brian Windhorst is trying to sort through the three-teamer. Mark Stein, Chris Haynes had it over the weekend, and that is, can the Cavs find a way to get Paul George? And the stuff that was reported on .com from Stein and those guys was just that it was George coming to the Cavs. Love would actually go to the Nuggets. The Nuggets would send a bunch of pieces over to the Pacers because the Pacers don't want Love. They want young guys. They want draft picks. I still wasn't quite sure what the Denver pieces would be in all this. So Windhorst is trying to figure out why, or help us figure out why this is where it's at now.
The best thing they have to offer is Kevin Love. But the issue there is that the Pacers aren't looking for big men. They have Miles Turner as their center. They believe he's a franchise player of the future now. And last week they just drafted T.J. Leaf, who's a power forward. So even if they really wanted Kevin Love, it doesn't fit with where they're going with their roster. So as a result, you've got to get a third team involved. And anybody who's been around the NBA for any length of time will tell you a three-team trade is a no-team trade. Obviously they happen, but they fail 99% of the time, and that's why this is a challenge for the Cavs to get done.
I also don't think there's anyone in the East, like Boston has picks, they have things the Pacers would want. Why would Boston, who also wants Paul George, and there were reports saying that they think that they could get him on an extension in a trade, which I'm not sure I even believe, but why would the Celtics want to help him? Okay, why would the Celtics want to help Cleveland down the road? It just doesn't make any sense. Would Denver, if you're moving younger pieces like a Gary Harris, is Jamal Murray somebody they wouldn't move and then add Kevin Love to what they have out there? Okay, maybe, but it's still going to be something the Pacers feel really enticed about. And then it comes down to like, wait a minute, are we doing something we like, or are we just helping the Cavs get Paul George? Mm-hmm. But there was another story that you guys were doing on First Take that was even bigger than this. It was just kind of a make-believe thing, right?
Well, I know this is from Brian Windhorst, and he's saying, and apparently said on ESPN Radio on Thursday night, that if both Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade are bought out by the Knicks and Bulls respectively,
when this summer,
then the Cavaliers are a likely landing spot for both of them. And that, let's for the moment set aside the probability of that coming true. I think you and I can both realize the probability on that low.
That's why I said it was kind of make believe. But
I do think it illustrates something, Ryan.
Okay.
Even if we take this low probability assumption that Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony sign for veterans minimums with Cleveland in the offseason, and they pull off this Paul George trade, would a team of Kyrie, Paul George, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Carmelo Anthony beat the Warriors? And I think the answer is clearly no. I don't think that all-star team from 2007.
Not entirely fair, but you say 2011?
Maybe 11. Then Paul George gets in the conversation. I don't think that team beats the Warriors. I don't think I don't even think it's all that close. Close might have been pushing it.
See, that's where you didn't need to do it. You didn't need to do it.
That group, I was good till that.
That group doesn't beat the Warriors. And how was that received?
Poorly.
What?
Man, I think fans.
Was it just the noises that you heard, or do you think it was an overwhelming response that you're wrong? Like, people think you're wrong for not thinking that group could beat the Warriors.
Well, I mean, who knows how accurate social media is of what's going on.
Still haven't gotten that lockdown yet.
No. Have we? We haven't. Have I not, or has the world not?
No, I just saw an app today for a new tape measure. It was unbelievable. The graphics, the demo, where it's you take your phone and then you go from like one end to the other end, start, stop, and then it runs how long the tape measure.
Yeah.
And then the actual graphic is the tape measure, and they did the demo next to a real live tape measure.
Yeah.
You know, pulled all the way out. Stanley deal.
Love it.
Look
I
at
want
this
that app.
Yellow tape, 46 inches. Now we're at 48. We got quarter inches. We get eighth. We get 16th. This is great. Then some contractor reply goes, would never use this on a job site. And you go, well, sorry. I guess we'll go bankrupt then. So anyway, that's a lot like the response to your thing.
I think the Twitter response, the social media response is that I'm a moron, but that's par for the course.
I agree with you, by the way.
Man, I mean, we all want to be all-star team creators, fantasy football managers. You know, it's not a team. It's not a team. It's a bunch of 30-year-olds who are used to being the man playing iso ball, learning how to play a new game. A game that the Warriors play better. I don't see it happening.
I don't know why it would be that weird for you to say that. Like at this point, it's a lot of names. I mean, that's really exciting. But my sense in talking to you, that whole Melo to the Cavs thing, this current trade deadline, so we're going back to February of 2017 here, that was Melo. Melo wanted out of New York and he wanted to go to Cleveland, and Cleveland's like, we'd have interest, but we're not giving you anything good. We're not giving you Kevin Love.
And why did the Knicks buy him out, by the way? You buy the Knicks buying out Carmelo?
It's so much money. So just to have nobody there, and I don't look, this is also something else, and this is maybe, like, I don't know Melo, I don't know Lala, shocker, but he may not want to leave New York because of his deal with her, right? Like they're not together right now, and some stuff went down, and then he's commenting on her Instagram. Maybe they're just in the friend zone. I don't know. And he's just being a good friend. He's commenting on Instagram. But sometimes when guys run afoul with the old lady friend, the last thing they want to do is leave that town, and especially when that town's New York City. Like, let me just stay in the mix. Let me just be an option.
Oh, you're saying single life in New York.
Well, he's thinking, I don't want my wife here to, you know, like if I at least stick around, and I don't know if he wants her back or not. I can't believe I'm on Melo's love life.
I can't believe it. You got there on your own, by the way.
I know I did. But look, I'll admit, like when Bobby Petrino ran into all his stuff, we talked to somebody that was close with him. I'm like, why is he staying in the state of Arkansas? Like, get out of town. He's like, headed out to the Pacific Northwest, get a cabin, learn how to trout fish, like take a knee for about a year. And somebody that was close to him was like, no, he wants to stick around. He wants to make this thing work out with the family. So sometimes that goes against him being bought out and wanting to go to Cleveland, but maybe that's another reason why he wants to stay in New York. All just rapid speculation right there.
But you're with me. Despite the quality of the names and who they've been in their career.
Yeah, the important part of this conversation.
Yeah, but back to that part. You don't see that beating the Warriors either. I know you got sidetracked with Lala there for a minute. But
I look at Smallman as this oasis in a desert every now and then. Does the Lala theory make sense to you at all? Are you on top of that story at all?
I think it makes sense.
You're not on top of that story, though.
No, I am. I think that he would want to stay there and try and work it out.
We need somebody from like People Magazine to be on a hotline for us. No?
No, that's a good idea.
Right. Just bat phone it to her.
Hey, how's this gossip going?
Yeah, who can we get? Because I go to you for other stuff, Smallman. But I think we need somebody who's like just anytime it's any of this pop culture, non-mainstream sports stuff for Will and I.
Perez Hilton? He's kind of had his day, right?
I don't think he's going to want to come on this show.
Be great.
Because I want a retainer. I want to be, whenever it gets down this road, who can we call immediately to sort us through all this stuff?
Like a Lala Mello insider?
Yeah, right. Are they trying to get back together? Does he miss her? I don't know any of these things. I'm just trying to figure out free agency, man.
Based on his social media, I think he misses her. His activities, lots of liking and commenting.
Right. He's liking and commenting.
Who do you get mad at? Chris Rock? Didn't that happen?
We're lost. We should get out. Pull the shoot.
Anyway, Warriors win.
Pull the shoot. Brian, when you saw this report on ESPN.com, again, it's Chris Haynes and Mark Stein, we know the Cavs want Paul George. We know they're looking for a third team. How close do you think this actually is to happening this offseason?
It was a good idea by the teams last week because Denver not only is dying to get a star player, but was willing to trade its first-round draft pick. I know this because Denver did trade its first-round draft pick to Utah in a separate trade that they did anyway. And the problem here, at least for the Cavs' pursuit of Paul George, is that they're not natural trade partners with Indiana, so you have to bring in a third team. Denver was a good option because Denver isn't really in the game for Paul George, although maybe they was one of the reasons why they didn't work, because they was like, listen, well, maybe we can talk to Indiana directly, but also because they have an extra abundance of young players and they're willing to move their draft pick. It's very hard for the Cavs to legitimately execute a trade for Paul George using Kevin Love because they're going to have to use his third team, and teams that are competing to get Paul George or compete against them in the Eastern Conference are not going to help them do it. It's hard to complete a 3-team trade if you've got 28 other teams to choose from. It's really hard when you got to cross some off the list. So this made sense from a conceptual standpoint, and they definitely talked, but I don't know how close it was ever to actually happening.
What do you think the Pacers want the most then? They obviously don't want to go in this season, but I didn't have a problem with them not trading him on draft night if they didn't like what they were getting back. So of all the rumored pieces and the young guy from Denver or future first, what do you think they would most want to be able to pull off before they get rid of George?
This is exactly, to me, like the Kevin Love situation 3 years ago. He was on the last year of his contract. He informed the Timberwolves he was not going to re-sign, and they traded him. And they got, in that case, the number 1 overall pick and a future draft pick, your first-round pick, which they later traded. And then Anthony Bennett, who was basically used to balance out the trade. So the Pacers would probably like a first-round pick and a high-quality young player. Now, the difference between Kevin Love and Paul George is Kevin Love was willing to sit down with the team he was being traded to and give some assurance that he wanted to be there long-term. And so I don't think Paul George is willing to do that, but that's the standard that the Pacers can certainly ask for, is a draft pick and a prospect. But meeting that and also executing the trade rules is easier said than done.
Brian, who on the Nuggets, or which players on the Nuggets, multiple players, was it that interested or could have interested the Pacers?
Well, I don't know exactly what the trade offer was, but I know if I was Indiana, what I would be asking for. I would have asked for the number 13 pick, which was a lottery pick, and I would have tried to get Gary Harris. Gary Harris is one of the more underrated wing players in the league right now. Would be a terrific get for them. Would leave a hole for Denver, but Denver would be getting Kevin Love. And it was also reported that Kenneth Faried would possibly be going to Cleveland. The Nuggets have been trying to get rid of Kenneth Faried in his contract for a year and a half now. So maybe part of the freight to agree to that type of deal would be to send Faried to Cleveland. But conceptual doesn't matter because it didn't happen.
Is there any indication that Paul George, where do we currently stand with Paul George's willingness to sign an extension? He's made all the noise about wanting to be in L.A. a year from now. Is any team that trade for him, does that team have any hope of signing Paul George to an extension?
Well, of course, because things change in the NBA on an hourly basis. The concept that anybody in the world knows what the lay of the land is going to be in next June, I can tell you that nobody knows what the lay of the land is going to be at 5 p.m. That's just the way it is in the NBA. So certainly, if you traded for Paul George, just because he says he doesn't extend with you doesn't mean he won't. He's not writing it in blood. But that said, it certainly doesn't make you want to offer a heck of a lot for him, and it reduces the position that the Pacers have in trade talks. And frankly, if you look at what the Timberwolves got for Jimmy Butler, which was 2 young players and a top 10 pick, they couldn't even get that for Paul George because Butler has 2 years left on his contract and isn't announcing to the world he wants to sign with the Lakers. That kind of put sort of put a standard on these types of trade talks. It's very hard. The thing I would say to the Pacers, and the Pacers know this, is that in free agency, things change so fast in the league that potentially opportunities could create that don't exist today. A player movement could happen or a defection could happen, and all of a sudden a team that wasn't interested in making a certain offer for George could change in a week. And that's why I think the Pacers have to practice some patience here. Their best offer may not have come yet.
Brian Windhorst, The Russillo Show at ESPN Radio. One other thought here, and I know Will had talked about it on First Take. We did it earlier on our show here. The theory being if Wade and Melo got to a buyout situation that they would join up and all this kind of new super team stuff with Cleveland. is this still just something these guys hope to do before they retire? Or is this something they think can actually help them compete with Golden State?
I mean, getting Dwayne Wade would certainly help the Cavs, and I think that's a more realistic buyout situation short term than Carmelo, but it doesn't help them defend Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson. Dwayne is a better defender than Carmelo is, but at this stage of his career, he's not the type of athlete that the Cavs would need. The Cavs need some more defensive athletes, but if you can get a star player like Dwayne Wade for free on the market because the Bulls are paying his money, you certainly are looking to do that. And realistically, if Dwayne gets bought out by the Cavs or bought out by the Bulls, there's only a couple of teams he would seriously consider, and I think Cleveland would have a chance to be on the list.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Brian Windhorst, the latest there.
Thought you were going to ask him about Lala.
I'm not. We're efforting Peter Rosenberg third hour, so we're going to try.
If you were making a list of people that might know about Lala and Carmelo, I think Wendy is pretty high. I mean, he's pretty plugged in there.
You want to call him back? Call him back? Ask. Hey, yeah, Smallman, will you call up Windhorst and go, Russillo forgot to ask you about Lala's Instagram page.
Don't tell him. Just call him back and say, the guys have one more question for you. And let's just see. I don't really care about the answer. On a scale from 1 to 10, how irritated will he be?
The Ryen Russillo Show.
Jordan Spieth joins us now, winner of the Travelers. So, Jordan, I'm watching, everybody that's in the crowd. You're sitting there, you're in this playoff, and you're lining up that chip. That ends up winning you the tournament. What were your realistic thoughts of how that was coming up, that chip out of the sand? I mean, did you really actually think that thing could go in? Where were you at when you were approaching that?
Well, no, I was definitely just trying to get it up and down and go to another place. There was obviously a bonus for it to actually drop, but it was amazing. I mean, the crowd there was second to none, big amphitheater. They were going nuts the entire week, and then I kind of lost it when it actually came down right on the pin. But no, it was a good position to be in. I was out of position off the tee, so I was just trying to get to another playoff hole.
You're right. You were off to the. Like the Berger hit it to the left. So all right, so he goes first. You're on this playoff hole. He looks like he's got a massive challenge in front of you. How mad do you get at yourself for then kind of doing the exact same thing where your drive isn't very good?
Yeah, I was frustrated. It's not that hard of a tee shot, and I hit 4 good ones in the 4 rounds we had played, and I just mishit it, and it kind of didn't quite clear one of the trees that I take it over. And I got pretty fortunate that it when it went into the tree, it actually popped back out in the fairway. I was really far from the green, but it could have been a lot worse. So it was a good break there. But yeah, walking off that tee, Daniel had hit it over there in the left rough, which is a tough spot. So if I hit the fairway, I've got a huge advantage. And then all of a sudden, it turns back towards his advantage once I hit it in the bunker. But it was kind of a crazy whirlwind at the end of the round there. I mean, I was really grinding and Bug, as I've known Daniel since we were 14 playing against each other. He's kind of got ice in his veins. I mean, the guy just loves the moment. He's making birdies closing in, and it was something that we always wanted to do. We've actually talked about it, being in a playoff with each other. We just kind of want to take each other on one-on-one. It's a fun challenge. It's cool that we used to do that 10 years ago, on the World. This moment was mine. I got the breaks today, and hopefully we get another opportunity. He's going to win many more times in his career as well.
Jordan, where'd that club land? I mean, you hawked it, and I've seen the clip like 10 times, and I can't see where the club lands.
I'm not sure. I really don't know why I threw the club. I don't know if I've ever done it before. I just kind of popped up, saw it coming down on the flagstick, and it was in sync with my caddy Michael Greller's rake throw. There's a slow motion video that's unbelievable of him tossing the rake up in the air as my club gets thrown horizontally into the side of the bunker, and then we run up and chest bump, and I mean it was loud. The ground was shaking. It was such a cool experience. I don't know if I'll ever have a moment like that again in my career. I mean, I feel fortunate to have one, and certainly soaked it in.
Well, on that note, I don't know if you keep any sort of internal mental list, but I mean, single shot, your favorite single shot, is that quickly number one?
Well, I would have to I hit my second shot at the 2015 Masters on the 13th hole there, the famous par 5, went for it in 2 and hit the green that essentially won the Masters at the time. And that will probably always be kind of the shot I look back on and say, man, I manned up and hit that shot, and that was a life changer for me. This one will definitely be up there. This was spectacular. It was, again, bit of luck involved for it to go in. But I was in that bunker in regulation, and I knew it was in a good spot. And I just tried to hit the same shot just a little bit further to the right, a foot further to the right. You can only do so much out of a bunker. You can't exactly judge the spot it's going to land. It's a lot harder, but fortunate with that one.
Talking with Jordan Spieth, again, wins the Travelers playoff hole, chip in from the bunker. Now, I may have this wrong, but I'm at home, I'm watching, and then you hit it right into the rough, and it was kind of a ball position beneath your feet, and you had water to the right, and I don't know if that was the 14th, but you were talking with your caddy, and it ended up being kind of mic'd up. And I love that stuff, and he was just basically saying, Jordan, I don't see the point of the risk, and then you just turn to him and go, what risk? And then you ended up hitting your shot. Like, can you take us through what that dynamic is like when it seems like you and the caddy are on completely different pages on your approach and how that worked out for you?
Well, yeah.
Was it the 14th?
It was number 13.
13,
I put the par 5 there, and I drove it over next to the water. It was in a little dangerous spot. I was out of position. It's a tricky hole. There's water right off the tee and left by the green, so I could take the trouble out by laying it back, which was Michael's suggestion, which is the right play from his perspective.
Is there ever a time where the caddy can overrule you?
Yes. I've given Michael 2 vetoes a year, along with hey, red light situation, step in and tell me what to do, pretty much. But yeah, 2 vetoes.
2 a year.
He hasn't used one this year.
So he's allowed to twice over an entire season with you say no, and then he only has one left.
Yeah.
No, he hasn't used it this year. He said.
He hasn't used one. It's 2 vetoes a year, but any kind of situation where it looks like I'm trying to do a little too much, he'll step in and definitely offer something. But 2 times where he can take the club out of my hand, snap it over his knee, and hand a different one, pretty much, saying, this is a play, we're going to do this. So we haven't tried, we haven't experienced it, but and hopefully it doesn't need to, but he's got that in his pocket.
Awesome. Hey, congrats again. It was so much fun for all of us watching. I know it was a great crowd. It's Jordan Spieth, your Travelers champ from yesterday. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Will Cain co-hosting today, The Russillo Show. Reminding you can watch all 3 hours of the show on ESPN News. All of our guests in the show, Pennzoil Performance Line, including Dan Dakich, who does great work, was with us on Mike and Mike the end of last week for the draft, and called in to Dari and Mel to talk some hoops. So, Dan, before we get to it, I have an issue with the Chris Paul take. I want to play that for everyone here. So we good?
What did I say? I forget. Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, perfect. That gets everybody caught up to date. You said this Saturday about Chris Paul.
To me, Chris Paul's the guy, what you call it in coaching is good enough to get you beat and good enough to get you fired. He's really good. Your AD goes to the booster meeting. Man, we got Chris Paul. God dang, is he good? He's the greatest assist guy. Yeah, well, why don't they win? Yeah, he didn't win at Wake Forest. Why doesn't Chris Paul's teams overachieve? They never do. They generally underachieve, and I pointed him as being a fraud.
Fraud. That was the one. When I think of fraud, I think of somebody that says the right things but doesn't really understand winning, maybe doesn't even want to win, doesn't care about winning. Chris Paul could be disappointing from the playoff thing. Chris Paul could be borderline dirty at times where I can't stand some of the stuff. But to say he's a fraud, I think that implies that none of the other stuff that's important really matters. I think the resume is disappointing, but I don't really think that's who he is.
Oh, I think he is, Ryan, and I appreciate, you have me on because many goateed wearing listeners of yours have taken umbrage with me, which is very exciting. Look, here's the deal. I say it all the time. Chris Paul is the guy that looks like the leader, but nobody follows because they know he's full of crap. He looks like the guy that, management and coaches can trust, but there's no way in heck they can trust him once they get to know him for 10 minutes. I asked a question. Isaiah Thomas took a journeyman, Bill Laimbeer, a journeyman, Ricky Mahorn, a journeyman, not even getting his career started, like a 12th round pick in Joe Dumars and wins championships. Why do you? The reason I think Chris Paul is a fraud is because his teams never do well. There's always bickering, there's always complaining, there's always whining, and he's the leader. It's like he's the leader until something goes bad, then everybody points at everybody else. No, he's the guy that's been there. They haven't ever overachieved. You cannot even begin to put him in the class of any of the great players in the NBA because all those guys have won or at least been close to a championship. And he's the constant of the whining, I was going to say a bad word, the complaining, the moaning, the dysfunction that is always the Clippers. And this isn't me talking. I talk to NBA guys all the time about it. Now, none of them are going to say it because, that's not what NBA guys do. But that's who the dude is. And until, somebody's going to pay him as a free agent, or maybe he weenies his way and stays there. But he's a fraud. He's got all this good guy stuff. And you mentioned 10 things. He comes off as this one guy, but you mentioned all these things, being dirty. He was dirty in college. He never wins. He's a good player, but he's good enough to get you fired.
He went 27-6 at Wake his sophomore year.
Yes. Lost to a horrible, not a horrible,
that West Virginia
rebuilding
team.
West Virginia team.
Okay, all right.
It's the great. All right, go ahead.
No, so that means then that you are a Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan guy. That if those players were but if they were paired with a different point guard, then they would have done better.
What I'm saying, if they were paired with a point guard that put up the same numbers as Chris Paul, because he's a numbers guy, he's got really good numbers, but was a leader, or if they were paired with an Isaiah Thomas guy who's just a killer, they would have done better, yes. Why does all of a sudden a guy like Steph Curry come into the NBA, Draymond Green come into the NBA, Klay Thompson come into the NBA, and they just dominate? Why? If Chris Paul is this Isaiah Thomas type, great point guard type, why are these other guys able to come in and do it consistently? Well, I'll tell you exactly why. Because none of them are frauds. None of them are this fake leader. They're all guys that, as Klay Thompson said, hey, man, rip me all you want for my playing game one. I don't care. We won. Chris Paul isn't that. And neither are the other guys. Look, think about this. DeAndre Jordan turned down the Mavs to go dress up in a woman's outfit for a State Farm commercial to play second fiddle to Chris Paul. That's that guy's mentality. You can't win with that guy either. So it's good enough to get you fired. Good enough. Hey, we got these guys. Good enough. Hey, he wanted to come back so he can be in commercials, which is the reason DeAndre Jordan came back, according to him. He wanted all the stuff of L.A. All right. Well, good enough to get you fired.
We're talking with Dan Dakich, Russillo Show, ESPN Radio. Will Cain just looking at me knowing that he's...
I'm happy to sit this
so
aside.
If all these things about Chris are true, because the numbers are there, then you need to explain to me from a basketball standpoint, because I know that there are players that put up empty numbers, and when it comes to winning time, it just doesn't happen. And that loss to the Rockets up 3-1, inexcusable, that's on him forever. But I've seen other huge moments against the Jazz. He did have a bad Game 7, but he was great against the Spurs a couple years ago when he beat him in the first round, and he beat him in Game 7 with a floater. What is it about his approach that causes them to lose games? Because I think for the most part when they lose in the playoffs, they do lose to teams that are better than them. Golden State's better than them. They're always going to be better than them, at least for this. And if you're telling me basketball reasons that Paul is basically preventing his team from getting further, does that mean then if he went to San Antonio, that'd be a bad thing for the Spurs?
No. I'm not giving you, to me, Ryan, basketball reasons aren't just dribbling, shooting, hitting a floater at the buzzer and winning a series. Basketball reasons are your leadership in the locker room, which are far more important. Basketball reasons are the trust that your teammates have in you as the leader. It's interesting, to hear all this stuff about Chris Paul and then to talk to Joe Dumars, and I keep using Isaiah Thomas because, let's face it, his numbers say that's the level we should be talking about him. All right, man. Hey, biggest killer I've ever been around. Blah, 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 blah. Joe was in studio. I think he came on your show maybe too. I don't know. But you listen to how people that played with guys talk about their team, their guy, their leader, with the reverence they talk. You don't hear anybody talk like that about Chris Paul. To me, that's more important. You're going to play 82 games a year.
All right, yeah,
you're going to be a good player.
Okay, but Dan,
you're going to be. You're going to win some You're going to win. Like Tracy McGrady hit game winners, but come on. Tracy McGrady is the pioneer of all this. He's the pioneer of getting a huge shoe deal before you ever do anything. Yeah, you had a game winner in a series, but we're talking about at that level, Hall of Fame level, where's the championships? And basketball stuff to me is more in the locker room and how people view you as a leader. Because, hey, let's face it. Teams that win championships in this era and going back in the NBA win because of great leaders. You can name them. And that's why the Clippers, they'll keep doing what they do, win some regular season games, sputter, and eventually everybody will get fired.
Dan, I've been listening to you, and I hear you said he's full of crap. You learned something about him within 10 minutes. If you spend longer than that with him, and that he's a failed leader. He's not a good leader. That's clearly what your position is. Just you seem to know something that's, for example, somebody like me doesn't know about Chris Paul. What is so failed about his leadership? Beyond the product on the court, what is it you know about his leadership?
Look, and people get tired, everybody gets mad at me because, like I said, that Porzingis had soft eyes and was a pain in the backside, and what's he become? People just killed me every time. Well, and I'm not bragging here. This is sad, really. But I spent, and I'm being literal here, every single day for about 25 years in a film room as an assistant coach. That's all I did. I mean, I had zero life. So you see certain things. It's like whatever your passion is, if you studied it more than other people, you would see different things that maybe somebody doesn't. And when I see, and I've studied leadership, and I've seen the reaction, you can tell it in body language. You can tell a real leader by how everybody reacts to them. And this isn't just, hey, they lost a series. I've been saying this for years. First time I ever knew who Chris Paul was, he might have been a freshman in high school, and I thought he was great. And he's had a wonderful career. I'm not saying he hasn't. But in terms of being an all-time great, that man. Now, the best thing that could happen to Chris Paul would be that he goes to the Spurs, where he has an organization that demands you pay attention to leadership, that demands. I had a chance to play golf with David Robinson. They drafted a kid out of Bowling Green named Antonio Daniels. That summer, David Robinson asked me, first time we met, hey, you were at Bowling Green. You know Antonio Daniels? Yes. Did you coach him? No, I'm coming in there this year. He just left. What kind of guy is he? Great guy. He better be or he's not fitting in here. That's exactly what Robinson said. And he's not talking about a guy that won't steal or any of that crap. He's talking about what kind of teammate. And I'm telling you, the best thing Chris Paul can do for his legacy is go to the Spurs where he has that kind of structure. Because the structure right now in L.A. is one of moaning, complaining, and whining, and he's never been given direction to be a leader, and San Antonio would do that.
Awesome stuff. We're past the clock here, Dan. Thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Will Cain, my hair's better than yours. Goodbye.
We'll react to that and the three-way trade with the Cavs and Paul George. It's ESPN Radio.
The Ryen Russillo Show.
Everybody knows how much I love Chris Paul. I feel like there are situations where great players are in deals where it just doesn't work out. Maybe that's going to happen to Chris Paul, and people that are obsessed with rings are going to say he stunk and he was overrated and all these different things. I will defer to Dakich in the NBA circles of guys that say, attitude and all these things. But I wonder, is Chris Paul's attitude the thing that prevents the Clippers from being more successful against teams that are almost always better than them in the playoffs? And they've been hurt, I think, 4 of the last 5 postseasons, which was conveniently left out by Dakich. If it's Paul's attitude that sets the tone for the locker room and that is what is getting in the way and limiting their success, then fine. Or is it Doc complains, Blake complains, DeAndre complains, Chris? They're a bunch of complainers. Nobody likes playing against the Clippers. They're the most disliked by their opponents of any team in the NBA, and I'm not telling you to like them when no one else in the league likes them. What I'm always telling you is that if you're coming on, as Dakich said, that saying Paul is a fraud, and he sets the tone for the culture, and the culture is negative, and that's why they can't beat, again, better teams when they're not healthy, which is a huge ask, then I don't really have a counter to that. Or could Paul be someone who, is bummed out because the team's always losing and because they're always hurt? Like Dakich says it's the first thing. I'm asking, could it be the second thing?
Well, I'll argue Dakich's position here, and I don't know. I'm listening to Dakich, right? And his
it's very convincing.
Well, he's very passionate, and he's indicting Chris Paul's leadership, not his shot making, not his basketball ability. He's indicting specifically his leadership. If you listen to that entire 10-minute segment, he comes back to it over and over. He calls him a fraud. He said Chris is full of crap, and it's something you can learn about Chris Paul if you spend more than 10 minutes with him. And then when I asked, what is it that I don't know? Specifically, what is it about his leadership, right? Dakich's response is, watch his body language on the court, watch how he responds to adversity, watch how he interacts with his teammates. So if I step forward from that presumption, if I accept the premise that it's leadership, Ryen, the answer has to be it's on Chris Paul, because that's the definition of leadership. It can't just be your second option to me, which was everything's bad around Chris, so he's reflecting what it is. Doc's a complainer, Blake's a complainer, DeAndre's a complainer, so Chris is going to be a complainer. Well, that's not leadership. It would support Dakich's point that what you do there as a leader is you stand against that tide. You reverse that. It's going to be hard. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but leadership isn't easy. Leadership is hard. So I don't accept that if Chris is acting this way, it's because his environment dictates it, because that's not what leaders do. Leaders dictate the environment, not the other way around. But again, all this is predicated on the assumption that Dakich offers. He's got bad body language, bad interaction with his teammates. He's a bad leader. I don't know.
This year they lose Blake. 2 years ago they lose Paul. 3 years ago when they blow that lead, he missed 2 of the games in the playoffs against the Rockets. There's that Memphis series where they didn't have Blake when they were up, and then they lost 4 in a row. They get hurt all the time. But we're talking about somebody right now that has the 5th best efficiency of any player in NBA history in the playoffs. So you don't like his body language? Fine. But this isn't Iverson with empty stats, putting up big numbers on bad shots because he is holding the rest of his team hostage offensively. Like Iverson put up some. If Iverson played today, he would not be nearly as revered. Iverson is revered because of what he meant to keeping it real. Like you would, if you were talking about Iverson in 2017, it'd be like for the culture. Okay, that's who Iverson is. Iverson was able to do this thing to be like a superhero for so many people because there was just no change from the pre-NBA to the during NBA, post-NBA. Like I saw him in Toronto, group of dudes around him, Yankee hat on, white T-shirt. Like, I'm not pretending to be anybody, and people, even though he flawed, love that he never pretended, but I think that somehow props up who he was actually as a basketball player. And here is Chris Paul, whose numbers, and these are, like, empty numbers are points. How can you be this good and be the problem? Because his body language is tough to watch. I love him, and I'll be like, just stop complaining. But this whole team complains. So if he's a fraud, he goes to the Spurs, and then this Chris Paul hurts San Antonio. Now I've decided that I do want Chris Paul to leave $60 million on the table. I want him to sign with San Antonio, and I want to see him win, being the exact same player, because I believe he can win. And there's so many people that think he's the reason they lose.
But you know, I feel like I'm arguing for a position that I haven't adopted, which is always a dangerous thing to do. I haven't adopted the Dakich position that Chris Paul is full of crap and not a good leader. I have not adopted that position. But I'm making this rebuttal to you almost on Dan's behalf with this presumption. You know those numbers don't tell you anything about his leadership. You know those PERs and efficiency and clutch time stats you can give me, which you can give me. It's not about whether or not he has empty numbers. It's about what he does to the players around him. That's what the leadership question is about. And look, we can go to any other sport to draw a parallel. Let me ask you a question. Is Aaron Rodgers' leadership something that is celebrated or questioned?
Question.
Does Aaron Rodgers put up incredible numbers?
Yes.
There's your parallel right there.
But see, I don't see Aaron Rodgers as this massive disappointment.
Well, I guess then we have we're having a conversation about what a disappointment is, right? And I think what I'm gathering from you is you think people are holding Chris Paul to an unfair standard. It's win an NBA championship or you're a bust.
When I see a graphic up on SportsCenter that goes, Chris Paul, the Clippers, blah, 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 here are all the numbers, can't get out of the first round other than the run against the Rockets, you go, so we're not going to put in any of the injuries? We're going to count the Portland series loss when they won the first two and then he missed the next 4 games. Like that's on Chris Paul. That's what happens. It gets treated as if that's on Chris Paul's resume, the failure of the team when they were up when he got hurt, and then the rest of the team couldn't do anything. They've been incredibly unlucky with the health stuff. But I want him to go to San Antonio, and I want him to prove Dakich and the others wrong that think he is somebody that prevents you from winning, not just based on style, but attitude. That's what I want to have happen now this summer. I figured I got goals. I got a goal this summer.
Thank you for listening to the Ryen Russillo Show podcast. You can check out the show live weekdays at 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and on ESPN News. The Ryen Russillo Show podcast.